I'd like to call the Monday, June 12th Town Council meeting in order. Roll call shows that all councilors are present. We'll begin tonight with an agenda review, and I'd like to suggest two changes to our agenda. First is removal of item 23-97 so that we can have a longer conversation with those applicants in a smaller meeting. And the other is removal of item 13, executive session. We have no new business to discuss during executive session. We're waiting on a ruling from the Maine Labor Relations Board. So I believe we need a nomination a second. No, we can just accept the agenda review. Oh, please do. No objections? All right. Should we
actually table them when it comes time? Just table.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Second, next item on the agenda is approval of minutes of May 8th and June 1st, 2023. Entertain a motion.
So move. So move.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. And we have an opportunity for public comment. I'd like to invite the public to comment on items in front of the council.
As a reminder, they'll need to turn the microphone on.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Matthew Powers. I live on Main Street, and I just wanted to show my support for the direction the council is going. I appreciate that they're looking at the 5 and possibly 10-year projections for what the city needs, and I like to see more data. I think that makes for a better, wiser use of our funds. So thank you.
Thank you.
I get a little clarification. We're going to have another public comment section after we do the budget, right? Okay, thank you. Is
there any other public comment at this time? Seeing none, do we have any online, Belle?
I don't see anybody with their hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to public hearings. Starting with public hearing A, presenting a victualer's license for American Legion, Dice Arts Travel Stop, Ledbetter's, Orono IGA, the store Ampersand, Spotlight Cinema, and Thai Kitchen.
Hello, everyone. Patrick Esty, Code Enforcement Officer. With A, I just first wanted to talk about victualers licenses and what they are. And so these licenses that we ask for are for any person who owns or operates a place where food is prepared or served to the public as a profit-making venture or consumption on or off premises. So as code officer, we go and we do inspections based off of life and safety. This is under Chapter 29, Public Health and Safety is what we're going off of. And I'm also recommending my approval, consent, or denial based off of myself, Code Enforcement Officer, police and fire, and our town clerk. So with A, we are recommending approval.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nancy, do we normally call for discussion on these items?
Yeah.
So is there any discussion regarding? So if there's public comment regarding this item. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to public hearing B. A Class 1 malt liquor, wine, and spirits license and victualer's license for Joe Enterprise Incorporated doing business as China Garden, 12 Stillwater Avenue.
So with liquor licenses, I just want to make it clear that we're not approving for a liquor license, but this does have to do with either special amusements or with liquor licenses. With the state application, they are asking for local municipality approval. And so this would again be code enforcement, fire and police. And for this one, we are asking for a conditional license. We're working with them right now on their fire suppression system. They have someone lined up for it, so we would like to ask for the approval of their license, and we'll work with them that will make sure that they get that done.
Thank you very much. Is there any public comment regarding public hearing B? Right, seeing none, we'll close public hearing B, open public hearing C, a class 1 malt liquor, wine and spirits license and special amusement permit for music, dancing and entertainment and victuals license to Wardwell LLC doing business as the Family Dog, 6 Mill Street.
And all inspections have been completed with this, and we are asking for approval.
Thank you. Is there any public comment regarding item C? Seeing none, we'll move to item D, a class 11 malt liquor, wine and spirits license, special amusement permit for music, dancing and entertainment and victuals license for Marg's Mex Orono LLC doing business as Margarita's Mexican Restaurant, 15 Mill Street.
So we're asking for a conditional license on this one as well. We're just waiting on some proof of previous licenses. There's a change in management right now, so we'd like to work with them and wait for that new management to get us the information on the eating establishment license and the liquor license.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on public hearing D? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public hearing D, move on to public hearing E, a class 3 wine and class 4 malt liquor license, special amusement permit for music, dancing and entertainment, victuals license for Sodexo America LLC, 5748 Memorial Union, University of Maine.
Staff has completed all inspections and is asking for approval.
Thank you. Any public comment on public hearing E? Seeing none, close that hearing, move to public hearing F, a class 1 malt liquor, wine and spirits license, special amusement permit for music, dancing and entertainment and victuals license for Sodexo America LLC, 5780 Wells Commons, University of Maine.
And staff has completed all necessary inspections and is asking for approval.
Thank you. Any public comment on public hearing F? All right, seeing none, we will close public hearing F. Move to public hearing G to hear comments regarding the relocation. Thank you very much. To hear comments regarding the relocation of November election polling place used for any federal state elections held during the 2023 to 2025 years to the Collins Center for the Arts, University of Maine campus, due to an infrastructure project taking place at the previous location, the New Balance Fieldhouse.
So for many years, the town has split elections. So elections that are held when the university is in session, we hold at the New Balance Fieldhouse. It provides enough space. We were having a lot of trouble trying to fit them into multiple polling locations in town. Because the New Balance Fieldhouse is undergoing construction, we've been working with the University of Maine. They have graciously offered the Collins Center for the Arts as a stand-in location. The way this works, council has to agree that it's a good location. Staff has already been working informally with the Secretary of State's office around some of the logistical issues and just making sure that we meet the standards. Our life safety folks have gone up, our folks around accessibility have reviewed. So it looks like it passes at the staff level. Now council will need to weigh in later on in this agenda. Before you weigh in, the public has a right to weigh in as well. And the idea being that we're not saying this is a forever move. We're gonna try it and see. This will cost us a little bit more money than we have paid in previous years, but still under $1,500, which is a pretty inexpensive election location.
Great, thank you. Is there any public comment on hearing G? Seeing none, we'll close hearing G.
What, can we comment on this too?
We'll
or no?
comment on it during our discussion of it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So we'll close public hearing G, open public hearing H to discuss the 2023, 2024 Municipal Capital and Water Pollution Control Facility, WPCF budgets.
So that is me. I have a presentation, surprise. We could start at the beginning would be great. So while Belle pulls up the first page, you can read it backwards if you'd like. I would be remiss if I didn't just mention that this has been a long process. Staff has been working on this budget since January. And I would also say that the reason that we're able to present this budget in the format that it's in and with the work that's gone into it is because we have a really remarkable staff here. We have incredibly talented people that work for the town. So, not myself, but I'm talking about other people. So as we go through, my thought was I would start working through. There are some logical places I think we could stop and take some comment. We have always kind of run this hearing together, but we can do whatever folks want. So I think the first thing to think about if we get to the, is that the budget is a document that's more than just numbers. It describes town council service priorities and the resources that are being allocated to meet those priorities. It determines how much money we're going to need to collect from taxpayers to fund municipal services. And it calculates the portion of the tax rate that is used to assess local property taxes. So you're going to see later on in the presentation, but local property taxes are actually calculated from 3 different budget processes. One is the municipal budget. The other is Penobscot County budget, which runs its own process, and RSU 26, who runs a process that's going to culminate tomorrow with a referendum here in council chamber. When we think about the municipal budget, it has 4 distinct components. One is the general fund. We also have an economic development program that is financed by tax increment financing dollars. We have special programs and projects which have special revenues, grants, and bonds. And then we have the water pollution control facility. WPCF operates much like a department of the town, but it is its own enterprise fund. We continue. So the general fund are dollars that we capture from that use tax dollars and general fund revenues. I think as a matter of course, I promise there aren't going to be a lot of charts like this, but when we look from at our needed revenue for this FY24 budget, we're going to need $15,164,150. And that is a decrease overall in the net assessment of $461,000 or 7.77%. When we look at the municipal revenues, we're up almost 18% and driven in large part by municipal revenue sharing. Finally, the state of Maine is funding revenue sharing at the full 5%, and the economic outlook is not bad. So we are seeing a pretty significant increase. I would just caution council that part of that increase has to do with revenue sharing too. And as we change the way we budget, the allocation of Rev 2 will likely go down. So when we look at how that works for us, you'll see that we are almost equally funding the revenue from property taxes and intergovernmental transfers. Those intergovernmental transfers would include revenue sharing. We get a pilot from the University of Maine, which would be considered an intergovernmental transfer. We also get roads, local roads money general assistance funds are the primary drivers. Homestead exemption and reimbursement and business equipment tax exemption reimbursement. Otherwise, they really, we have several pots of smaller funds. Our taxes would be your motor vehicle taxes, boat excise, and the fees we get when people don't pay their taxes on time. Other revenues are things, costs or revenues that come in from, for example, RSU 26, we share the school resource officer. So we book 100% of the expense and get 50% of the cost back as a revenue. That would also include donations we get from the Housing Foundation and Freeman Forest as payment in lieu of taxes, and a $138,000 a year transfer from the WPCF to cover administrative costs associated with running the WPCF. Grants and reserves are up considerably this year due to, we'll talk about it a little bit, but due to infrastructure grants and FEMA grant. So if you continue, you will see in the blue, or the first bar in each section, is what we had for revenue for budgeted revenues for FY23. The red bar, or the second bar in each section, is the projected revenue for FY24. And what you'll see there is very clearly the biggest driver in this is municipal revenue sharing, which we are anticipating $1.3 million increase. And the largest decrease is in property tax, which again is about $400,000. Next page. So then we move on to our operational and capital expenses. It's going to surprise you, probably not, that they equal the revenue. Our operating expenses are up about 7.6% or $732,000, primarily driven by public safety increases, wage adjustments, and we have an adjustment or an increase that we are planning for from the Orono VZ Water District of about $80,000. So that was a big driver in that. Debt service. So we take bonds to pay for expensive things, and then we have to pay it back over time. Our debt service off that is funded by the property tax is down $13,000 this year. Economic development expenses. So this is the cost of operating our economic development department, paying credit enhancement agreements. There's also two bond repayments that have to do with economic development that are all funded by program development funds that are accumulated from tax increment financing dollars. So there is, if we went back to the revenue side, you would see that there is a direct offset in tax increment financing dollars for the economic development department. Our overlay is an estimate that is calculated at when we commit taxes, and our TIF program expense relates to the cost of having the tax increment financing districts in which we shelter money. That money has to be brought in and pushed into the program development fund. So it is a cost on each year when we commit taxes. That is not a number that council has control over, other than to decide to revise tax increment financing districts. And then we have a capital budget, which this year we're proposing $2.1 million capital budget. That's an increase of about $378,000. So overall, the municipal expense is up a little over $1 million or 7.17%. So when we look at where that goes, you'll see that the lion's share of our funding happens, or expenses happen in public works, public safety, community development, general government. We have some debt. And then the very small pie pieces in the middle are facilities, parks and recreation, and the library. And there is the chart that shows what we were talking about before, that public safety has the largest increase this year. A lot of that has to do with the fact that for years, our police officers and firefighters were underpaid, and we had to go through collective bargaining to bring them up to market. We are in the middle of a plan to do that for them. It's also recognizing the fact that our costs associated with emergency medical services is skyrocketing. And as our trucks age, instead of going out and buying very, very expensive trucks, we need to repair them, and that cost is going up. The other piece to point out here is that the Parks and Recreation budget is up significantly. Part of that is in additional programming that is planned. Part of it is the after-school program that we budgeted for last year. We thought we were going to have minimal participants, and we were excited to have maximum participants. So that increased that budget by almost $30,000. There is an offsetting revenue for that, but we look at revenues and expenses differently. There's also some shifting that had to happen because we used to pay our Parks and Rec director 50% of their wages out of the tax increment financing district. With the shift and more attention to programming as opposed to events and marketing, we had to dial that back, which shifts more onto the general fund as well. I feel like saying questions, but I don't know. All right, next page. So, it's really hard on a budget that was 360 pages long to point out everything. But in general, the highlights would be that this budget maintains most of our existing services as they are today, that it does include wage adjustments to support the retention and recruitment of our highly skilled and professional workforce. We are in year 2 of a 3-year plan for that. And it continues our existing and begins to expand our existing efforts and begins to expand stable capital investment strategies. So folks that were paying attention to the budget process really heard council start talking about how can we get to a reasonable place that we are eliminating the big spikes, because when we cut and get to $40,000 a year for capital equipment, next year we still need the 300. So how can we make it a stable draw? So when we say maintains most existing services, this tries to get at what I mean by that. So the gray bar is all of our existing services and resources to deliver those services. We're increasing in 4 areas that are kind of exciting. The council wants to create a community building grant fund program where people can apply through a process that council will create to get seed money to roll out community building pride place kind of activities and events, which will be kind of cool. Our Parks and Rec programming does include just an extra $10,000 to allow us to be a little bit more flexible, perhaps take on the ski program and do some things like that. We're also looking at adding asset management software, which is $10,000 on the general fund, $4,000 for WPCF. That will allow us to give council the charts, the graphs, and the data that they really love, and have all the information in one piece as opposed to separate places for lots of different pieces of information. And then finally, this budget includes a $9,500 annual contribution to support the Orono Economic Development Corporation's outdoor center. The service decrease here comes from the decision to reduce or not fund 2 public works positions, which are equal to 80 hours a week of staff time, and not purchase a 10-wheel truck, which saves or reduces the budget by $350,000. When we talk about that, I think I can recap what we talked about in public in the council work session. The most immediate impact of that the residents will see is a decrease in the services that we can provide when we are responding to winter storm response. So we would be dropping from 5 plow routes to 4 plow routes. That adds about an hour onto each turn that you do with those, and will create delays in getting to secondary roads, sidewalks, and parking lots. And then the not purchasing the truck will save the $225,000. There will also be a reduction in spring, summer, and fall level of service. The community might not see it as much, depends on what your threshold is. If you put your bags, your leaves, and your brush out at curbside, it takes longer to get that picked up. It also will create some issues internally as Public Works is a support for all the other departments in terms of setting up for elections and putting on community events and things like that. But it's really hard to quantify. So do we want to stop there or we want to move into capital budget?
This might be a good chance to entertain any questions from the council or the public on this section of budget. So counselors or the public, if you'd care to weigh in on the presentation so far.
I'm Frederica Smith. I live at 8 Chestnut Court, and I wanted to comment on the decrease in the public works positions. Those positions are vacant, so it doesn't mean that anybody currently working there will disappear. But I think the impact will be very negative during the winter storms. The storms have been difficult because they're increasingly ice and slush. They are not just snow, which is much easier to deal with. The big storms are actually not as much of a problem for the public because everything closes. It's the 6 inches of ice that's the problem. And I think losing that hour of plow time, adding an hour to each route, basically has significant negative effects for parents dropping kids off at school and then heading out to a job in Bangor or at the university. They can't do that on foot. It's impossible. It has negative effects on really young people. You don't want kids out in the middle of icy slush. You don't want old people out, adding to public needs of ambulances because they fall on icy slush. I think it's, I'm not sure the word is penny wise in this situation because it's more than pennies, but it's pound foolish. I think we will regret, the community will regret having that service cut back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments or questions? Please, Tom.
Tom Perry, 136 Bannock Road in Orono. I completely agree with Mrs. Smith's comments. I'm disappointed with your decision to cut back the public works positions. Those positions were added after a great deal of thought on the part of previous councils, responding to public concerns about road conditions primarily. We also benefited when we added those positions by not having to have a contracted service take care of our cemeteries. We weren't happy with the service we were getting, and we were spending $30,000 a year for it. We're much happier with the service we receive now. I hope you'll reconsider that decision. I know you have time before final budget approval. I just think it's the wrong direction to go in. I realize how difficult it is for the council to balance community needs and wants with the resources that are available. But this was a very important service, and I think it's something the community expects and deserves. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Do we not have a service doing the cemetery now? Is that correct?
We took that on. Public Works does the cemetery.
Okay.
And when part of the reason we brought the two people on, that allowed us to break the contract of the people that the company that we used to use for the cemetery, because it gave Rob enough people to do that in the summer.
Okay, thanks. I hadn't heard that.
Okay, Jeff Gordon, 22 Hamlin Street. I have a lengthy plea and two short observations. I'll start with the lengthy plea. Way of background, the municipal budget and delivery of service is a highly complex system of competing interests and self-limiting resources. I'm reading this because I prepared statements for this. So the council and the manager and the staff work collaboratively to provide amenities and services to the community, and each has their own unique role. The council and management personnel change over time. Over the last 20 years or so, that change has been gradual. As a community, we have all enjoyed the stability that the gradual changes in council composition has provided. Recent election cycles, the community has put in place a council that collectively has very little experience with municipal budgeting and governance, and near zero institutional memory of the struggle to balance resources with the demands for services. Since the last election, I have personally met with each councilor individually and expressed my concern about the lack of memory shared among the council. With the resignation of one council member, we now have a total of 5 years of experience shared among the 6 remaining councilors. Historically, we have had 40 to 50 years of experience in any one council. To their credit, the council members of the current council have put a lot of effort, and I really appreciate the effort that I've seen into getting themselves up to speed, seeking information, talking to management. In recent budget workshops, the manager and the staff have demonstrated their encyclopedic knowledge of our municipal government and its inner workings. They have had to answer questions about even the most trivial details of the budget, revealing the depth of the council's inexperience. This created an additional burden on the staff, but they enthusiastically engaged with the council members in their effort to become better acquainted with the resources and the services. The council brought into the budget process a legitimate concern, which I think we all share, about the sustainability of increasing expenditures and the tax burden on our community. Management brought a detailed understanding of the evolved service delivery system and the justification of the associated expenses with that system. My observation after attending and viewing budget workshops is that the council is asking all the right questions, but they're selectively listening to only some of the answers, particularly when it comes to the issue of public works and staffing levels. The public works delivery system in this town is the result of evolution over 15 years or more of so responding to changes in the cost of materials and capital equipment, the cost and availability of labor, and the challenging demands and priorities of the community. We have been chronically understaffed in Orono and under-resourced. Skill and creativity of the management and the staff in both the schools and in the town government has nevertheless allowed our community to prosper. We have had one of the lowest levels of taxable property value in the state per capita, while at the same time, we have one of the highest levels of service demand due in large part to the presence of the university in our community. The tax burden is a serious problem. The management has explained to the council why a significant reduction in public works staff is ill-advised. And yet some councilors have persisted in reducing the public works staff as in the budget that is before us this evening. I urge the council to reconsider this staff reduction, deferring this decision for 1 year to carefully observe and query the public works performance over the coming year. And after having acquired a more thorough understanding of the complex public works program, make a staffing decision then with a factual and more personal experience of how the system works. Okay, now that's my plea. 2 observations. You may not like this, but I hope you take this in the constructive spirit with which I'm offering it. The apparent tone from someone who has been observing of the discussions between the council and the management has been unfortunate, in my opinion. The council, with little experience and no institutional memory, appears to the outside observer to undervalue and be dismissive of the experience and expertise of the staff has developed over many years. I'm hopeful that this is only an appearance and not a substantive and persistent attitude of the council. Second observation. Sitting in council seats, you are representing everyone in this community, not just the people who have recently spoke to you. You need to scrupulously avoid statements about anyone other than yourself in a public setting. Particularly comments about the performance or motives of a staff member or a contractual service provider to our community. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Is there other public comment?
We're going to arm wrestle over it. Megan Gardner, 69 Bennick Road. Apparently this is the parade of former counselors tonight. I'm happy to join it. Thank you to everybody on council and staff for your time and energy. Thanks to folks for coming out tonight. There's a lot of complexity. I want to try to keep this brief. Like Jeff, I have kind of like an ask for today and a plea for the future. So the initial draft of this budget anticipated increases to the mill rate in all 3 entities, the town, the county, and the school. Council, as it always does, asked for options to reduce, and staff presented a list of changes. A combination of some of those changes would have meant the option for council to have no increase to the town portion of the mill rate and no reduction to the service level as we currently experience it. Council decided to go further than that for its own reasons, primarily with this massive chunk out of public works, essentially making up for the increases by the county and the school. And we can play around with nice language and say chose not to fill 2 vacancies or, purchase equipment for said positions. It's politician speak, trust me, I know. But in reality, it's a cut to public works. That's 80 hours, a 2-person work crew that we have had at our disposal until very recently that we will no longer have going forward. And we will feel that throughout the seasons, not just in the winter. And I urge council to put those positions and the equipment they need to operate back into the budget. After watching the hearings as well, I was watching at home. I think that council is minimizing the impact that this cut will have. I was really concerned listening to the conversations that council had about this. To me, and similar, I want to echo some of Jeff's comments. It seemed as though the town manager and the public works director were really struggling to get council to hear them and fully appreciate the impact. And I was also very concerned by the conversation around wanting public works to prioritize sidewalk clearing over road plowing even with reduced resources. Council Chair Wingard and Frederica Smith made some excellent comments at last Monday's meeting about how prioritizing street plowing is also very much an equity issue. And I particularly appreciated Jeff's comments about the juxtaposition of spending $20,000, ish for the benefit of healthy, fit people who can afford to ski, which is wonderful. And I do think that the town should support all of that. But to juxtapose that with a desire to cut a service level that would impact people who don't have the resources of able-bodiedness or time or the equipment to bike around town or walk around town. And really, this would mean folks also who live close to the center of town in and around a snowstorm. It seems very short-sighted to me. And while councilors nodded and vocalized agreement, which was encouraging, they still chose to not fund those positions. And I want to make it clear that walkability is very important, and I believe that as well. However, true walkability and reducing our reliance on cars isn't just about sidewalk clearing. It also requires a foundation of local infrastructure and resources that we just don't have yet. So in the meantime, if it really is an equity issue for you, then the obvious answer is to prioritize both roads and sidewalks. If it's truly about equity, then fund the two positions and purchase the plow. So that's my pitch for tonight. And to wrap up, making a request for the future, I just want to think about next year's budget and a particular resource that I think is maybe undervalued at this point, which Jeff touched upon a bit. I know how difficult this process is, especially when you're new and there's a lack of experience on council. So this is the moment to really lean on our largest and most essential taxpayer-funded resource, which is our exceptionally experienced and knowledgeable staff. And I was disappointed to really not see council make best use of this resource during this budget season the last few months. The process is very straightforward. Your job is to already be out in the community, knowing what the community wants and needs, all members of the community and not just the folks that you happen to talk to recently, as Jeff pointed out. So you tell staff what the community needs, and staff comes back with a plan and says, this is how we do it, and this is how much it costs. And then you decide yes or no and live with that decision. This time, during this hearing season, I frequently saw council doing one of two things that I found a little concerning. On the one hand, sometimes when staff said, this is how we do it and this is how much it will cost, council delayed making a decision in favor of a vague promise of a community conversation at some point in the future. Though staff has already been trying to facilitate these community conversations for a couple of years now, which council, to be quite frank, frequently did not help with or attend. Conversely, when staff would say, this is how much we do it and this is how much it will cost, council often said, no, it doesn't have to cost that much, and you can just do it another way. And tried to wade into operations, which is not its area of expertise, and quite frankly, by the town charter is not its territory. That's why we have a staff of highly qualified individuals working for our community every day. As a council, it's your job to be good stewards of that resource. And on many occasions over the last few months, we saw an unprecedented number of staff members come out to attend council meetings, to give public comment, to gently and professionally as they could urge council back onto the right track. This should be a big warning bell for council. It takes a lot for staff to come sit in this room and even give the appearance of criticizing councilors. That takes a lot. They don't want to do that. So the fact that many have over the last few months, that's concerning, and it should be to you as well. I just want to say that, if staff working conditions are truly a priority for council, then I would urge council to turn its focus inward and explore the ways in which its own words and actions may be negatively impacting our staff. So in the upcoming year as a council, my plea for, projecting forward to the next budget season is I urge you to take the stewardship and management of this resource and make it more of a priority. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing where this community conversation goes next. Thanks.
Thank you. So,
I'm going to interrupt the parade of former councilors here, I guess. Doug Johnson. 109 Forest Avenue. And I always get choked up when I talk. People that know me are used to that. So if that happens, I apologize. I lived in Orono for 34 years. I do want to express my appreciation for your service as counselors. And the knowledge here is so great. And that's going to be one of the points I want to make. I'm sure this is a lot of work. Managing a town is a far more complex job than I ever imagined doing. And I'm sure the learning curve for you all is really steep. I think it's really important that you learn from the manager and the directors. I wish there was a mechanism, although it's kind of happening here, for mentoring new counselors. And I think that you have to rely on the manager and the directors to do that. But thank you all for that. The knowledge was deep, all that you said. I don't know why I get all this right. So I'd like to see that. And in the meantime, it's really important to heed the learnings from the town manager and the directors. So yes, I also had concerns about the budget process that I watched, particularly the last one. The council does seem particularly focused on cutting the budget. And the decision to cut the 2 positions seemed to be made on the fact that these are open positions and therefore no one will get laid off, which is good. Some cuts must be made. It may only delay the work by an hour or so. And the council members are comfortable with cutting 2 positions, but retaining funds to hire one if needed in the fall. I'm not sure if the councilor's comfort is a good criteria to look at. Work conditions and union limitations were mentioned by Sophie, but not really carefully considered, in my opinion. I'm familiar with the challenge associated with being a professional in charge of providing a level of service to a large consumer base, mental health in particular. I'm also familiar with trying to provide that the level of service that I would believe is needed and not given the resources to do it. Morale gets affected when the workforce is too stressed. Turnover becomes a problem. Recruitment and retention of good employees is difficult, especially in this day and age. And I don't think any of us really know what it's like to work 16 hours a day and then have 8 hours of sleep. Overall, my biggest concern is that Sophie and Rob and the other directors be listened to and treated with respect as the professionals they are. I did this one time in front of 300 college graduates and their parents. Sorry. I think in the 35 years I've been here, Sophie's the best town manager we've had. And Rob's the best public works director. The care of the roads during storms is far better now than it ever has been, in my opinion. And so my biggest concern is retaining Sophie and Rob, and they have to be treated with the respect they deserve. It's a real challenge to find an excellent town manager.
Thank you very much, Doug. Sir.
Turn around.
It's your turn, Tom.
So as you can tell, I don't have prepared remarks. I'm Tom Spitz, 14 Kell Street, Orono. And I served on the council for 15 years with some of these people. And I'll give you a couple of things. As a counselor, you have to kind of figure out, well, what are your priorities? And my first priority was always the safety of the citizens. And, you know, you have a police department, you have a fire department, but you also have a public works department. And the public works is considered by Homeland Security and FEMA as part of the emergency response. So, and I don't think the storms are going to get any easier. I think we may be setting ourselves up for a problem here. The other thing is, from my experience, there's nothing, the phone calls you're likely to get seem to pick up over this issue, over snow removal. that or cutting fire or police departments. I don't know how you guys get your public input. It used to be that people would run into me in the grocery store, and it took a while to get grocery shopping done some days, but you know, I'm not familiar with all these other issues that people are talking about. I did sit on the committee that hired Sophie, and I think she is a great resource if that's anything that I don't know what's going on there. And you know, there's a reason you have personnel meetings not in public anyway, by the rules, and just it's the best way to work it out. But that's what I see. I wouldn't discount Public Works. And I have to agree that our Public Works Director is amazing. He has done a tremendous job for us and to help us save money and to get things done and to get us some sharing opportunities with the state and various other groups that we didn't see out of previous directors. So that's all I have to say. And I'm sorry. Thank you for serving, because you know, it's a thankless job, and you did get some criticism at various times. It's nice to know what's going on, but it is a difficult job, and I appreciate you guys sitting in here and doing the job. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Is there other public comment?
Hi, I'm Matthew Powers again at 178 Main Street. Thank you all. It's good to hear perspective. I have a different perspective. I am a father of 3 kids, and it's important to me to see, you know, the budget going to Parks and Rec. It's important to me to see that people are looking into the future to see what do we need for playground equipment. The library for me is a hub. It's a hub of all of my children's friends. It's a hub of all of the town. It's where people come together. And so I'm personally ecstatic that these things are being put as a priority. And I hope that this will continue into the future. And it's always difficult. It's so hard to cut. And somebody's going to be in pain. And that's a difficult thing. I'm just glad that that I see some of the priorities that I am concerned about being taken into account at my stage in life. And I know that I have a different perspective. I'm a family man with young kids, but I also hear what you guys are saying about equity, trying to make sure that people can get to their jobs and get to school. That's also important. So thank you. And thank you, counselors, for serving.
Thank you very much.
Jeff, we do have somebody online who also has their hand raised.
Okay, thank you. After this public comment, we'll take the online comment. Thanks.
Okay.
Nancy Larson, 30 Orono Landing Road, Outer Forest Avenue. My mother always said I take things too personally, and I've come to this a little late, understanding about this potential cut in services. But Public Works is a foundation for everything else that happens in this community. There are particular times, especially when the roads are ice and there's snow, but there are other things too that happen that I'm not aware of, that I have to depend on the Public Works Director to make judgments about and know what he needs or she needs during the year to cover those things that come up. I've paid taxes for 36 years in Orono. I haven't had a child in a school, but I am more than happy to support good schools, good recreation, good after-school programs. I'm an early childhood person. That's been really important to me. However, I'm astonished that there would be such a huge cut in Public Works for a town like this that also is this town represents something to the people of Maine as well. With the university here, we have people coming from everywhere to visit, to attend conferences. It's a very public town, and public works is vital to keeping this town the way it should be, as a place that's cared about. And then you can build on that. But thank you. Everybody else says also, I support what people have said, and I understand about the children and recreation, but thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Bill, can you allow the online commenter to speak, please?
Yes, so I've allowed Catherine Thibodeau.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Catherine Thibodeau. I live at 37 Broadway. I also am the executive director of Independence Advocates of Maine. We have facilities at 2 Hillside Road and 234 Main Street. And really, I don't know any of the people who spoke before me. And I am so incredibly impacted by the fact that I believe his name was Jeff, spoke to my exact experience. And I could have written his comments. I have seen, just speaking to the public works position, I have seen, and I don't intricately understand and pay attention to every budget cycle and every decision of town council, but I have seen much improved snow removal in the years I've been at my home now since 2011, and we depend upon both sidewalks to be cleared for my children to get to school, and for me to be able to leave my home and get to my work where I am sometimes essentially needed. And so there has been, an hour is a big difference. And just from, and I'm not sure what the change was, but about 4 or 5 years ago, sidewalks were almost always cleared within a storm, you know, within the storm cycle, or a few hours after the storm had happened. And there was a long time that wasn't the case. And kids would walk in the road, humane students would walk in the road, and it was very dangerous. So, you know, it sounds like some changes were made and put into place to improve that. And it sounds like the council has not kind of disregarded that and is going back to that previous way that it was. I would also, you know, I listen to council meetings and I wonder, am I sensitive? Am I overly sensitive to the tenor and the tone that I hear from council members? Am I missing something? And really, by hearing my fellow townmates speak tonight, I am very affirmed in what feels like a very disrespectful and discounting approach to our employees, our town employees. And I interact with the town as a resident, and I also interact with the town as an employer, supporting really the most incredibly vulnerable people in our town. I can guarantee you that the people that we support at our facility at 2 Hillside Road are the most vulnerable. And the town has been nothing. The town employees have been nothing but professional and helpful and supportive of any ask that we have, any ask that I have as a citizen. And I have the most confidence in them. And I don't understand, and again, yeah, I don't understand the backwards workings and what's going on, but I don't understand the public attitude and approach and disregard for what's being presented to council members. So I just really encourage, you know, the people that spoke before me way more eloquently than I did, for there to be some deep consideration and you know, kind of inward thinking about how it appears to us as citizens of our town. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much for your comment tonight. Are there other comments, either online or in council chambers? Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Spitz made one comment that I disagree with. He said that this is a thankless job that you have serving on the council. In my 15 years on the council, it was the most rewarding experience I've ever had in my life. And to prove it, I'm keep coming back.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, well, we're going to continue with capital investment plan, capital budget, and we'll have other opportunities to speak later this evening.
Jeff, can I ask one question before we move on?
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
How long have the 2 vacant positions been vacant at Public Works? I think that's for you, Rob. Yeah.
So the first one was at the end of March, at the end of snowplow season, and the second one was actually the end of May.
So one's been less than a month then. Okay. Thank you.
Bill, I'm ready to start again if I think that's what Jeff wants. So we're going to move on to the capital investment plan. In accordance with the charter, we're required to provide the council with a 5-year capital investment plan. Before I get into the weeds of the plan, I do want to say that one of the things I think we have done, which you'll see for infrastructure, is come up with a longer range plan. And during the budget process, I think we started down a path to be able to do that for equipment and facilities as well. So with the capital investment plan, this is only for the general fund. So this is not WPCF. We are proposing a $2.1 million investment. You'll see that $1.5 million of that will be funded through general fund taxes, with $650,000 of alternative revenues or resources. So reserve funds, tax increment financing funds, and grants primarily. If we want to go through, I can, next slide, we're going to take you through. So in comparison for last year versus the year ahead, this is a $378,000 increase, or 17.5%. Next slide. So when we look at capital equipment, that $487,000 is seeking to buy an ambulance, some fire hose, self-contained breathing apparatus air bottles, a police cruiser, to continue paying on the taser lease, and to continue paying on the PD audiovisual lease, which would be the body cameras and the cameras in each of the cruisers, along with the data storage required for that. Of that, $207,000 is funded through taxes, $185,000 through reserves, $90,000 we're using ARPA money to get our ambulance onto a cycle that will be sustainable, and $5,000 from the sale of surplus equipment. Next slide. So maybe the other way. There we go. So before we talk about the capital infrastructure investment plan, I just want to talk for a moment about the strategy. And I hope when we come back next year, we're going to have strategies for facilities and equipment as well. But in FY21, we had a backlog of about $2 million of capital projects that were creating a bottleneck in our capital plan. And the council at the time decided, after considerable discussion, to look extremely long-term at our infrastructure needs and make a commitment to fund between $800,000 and $850,000 a year from the taxes. So we would have a consistent draw on taxes for infrastructure, and also to borrow $2 million, or we floated a bond for to clear up that bottleneck. So when you look at our capital investment plan on the next page for infrastructure, this year, the entire plan is almost $1.2 million. 825,000 of that is funded through taxes, 50,000 through tax increment financing funds, and $320,000 from grant funds. All those dollars combined will address issues on Charles Street, Stillwater pedestrian improvements, Colburn Drive lighting, Forest Avenue sidewalk extension, Grove Street, Pierce, Peters Pond and Hillside Streets, University Place, address the retaining wall near the UCU. The big wall needs regular maintenance, and Forest implement some traffic calming measures on Forest Avenue. Capital facilities is $335,000. All of that is funded through taxes. We have playground repair and beginning to replace pieces of the community playground just across the parking lot. Schools Landing needs a new dock. Our pool gutter repair project is over budget, or will be over budget by the time we get it quoted. We are looking at upgrades to the public safety building. Data systems IT is what's programmed now. We're in the middle of a larger assessment, so that we are saying that that money would be used in the public safety building. Keith Anderson Community House is going to get some paint. The senior center needs a new ramp to be ADA compliant. And the senior center parking lot needs some work so that we don't start losing tires and front ends. Capital reserves. So a capital reserve are funds that council approves to put aside for future spending, either because we're looking at a large project or purchase, or to be able to use that to offset the spikes in the tax rate. So we have reserves going into police technology, IT and audiovisual, capital equipment reserve. We have building funds for the library and the public works facility, and a major maintenance fund for everybody else, and landfill closure. So we put $15,000 a year aside every year that the landfill is open, in hopes that when it's filled, we'll have enough money to help offset the enormous cost of closing it. Want me to move into grant funds, Jeff?
Let's pause really quickly and just make sure that there's no comments or questions on this part of the budget. Okay. Seeing none, let's move on.
So we also have a grant fund. This year, for the first time since I've been here, we're actually funding operations through a grant. We were awarded a grant of a little over $700,000 to hire 3 fire EMS response positions. For the next 3 years, we're evaluating to see whether or not having these positions will reduce overtime and increase staff morale as well. For the coming year, this will be the first full year of the grant. We are anticipating $246,006 for salaries and benefits for these 3 individuals. Next slide. We also in this budget are considering the use of ARPA money. So the town received $1.1 million of ARPA funds that the council has been very carefully allocating to projects and purchases. This year, it is suggesting using $90,000 of ARPA money to fund a portion of the ambulance purchase. For those who didn't enjoy the rousing discussion at council about the ambulance purchase, the ambulance, the cost of an ambulance has skyrocketed seemingly overnight or over COVID. The town had a very clear path for many, many years where we saved $75,000 a year, or we would get the money accumulated, and on the third year, we would appropriate up to $75,000 and be able to buy an ambulance. So it was a consistent draw on the tax base for the ambulance of $75,000 a year. The increased cost of an ambulance jumps that to $108,000 a year. So that is with stretching. So staff came back and said, let's try to go from a 6-year cycle on an ambulance to an 8-year cycle on an ambulance, which means we have to buy an ambulance once every 4 years instead of once every 3 years. And accounting for regular CPI, that comes to $108,000 a year that we need to save. Because we hadn't saved that money, it would have been quite a hit to general fund taxes. So instead, what council is suggesting is that we utilize the $185,000 we have in ambulance reserve, plus $90,000 from ARPA, plus the $108,000 that we should be saving or spending each year for the ambulance. So long-winded way of saying council would like to use $90,000 of ARPA money towards purchasing the new ambulance. And finally, our Public Works Director managed to secure a State Department of Transportation Heads Up grant fund in the amount of $320,000 for pedestrian improvements on Stillwater. So that will be a grant as well. We will continue, I assume, to write and get grants through the year. They just are not part of the adopted initial budget, other than these that I just talked about. So this is where it gets fun. We can talk about what does all this mean. So the town council is having this, they had workshops that are all public. You can go back and watch them. We are having this public hearing tonight. And then on the 26th of June, there will be a formal adoption of the budget. So my understanding is that council will finalize the budget for adoption, or what it's going to take for the final adoption at its workshop on June 20th at 5 p.m. So for this year, the municipal budget is down $461,000 or 7.77%. Next slide. The other component of the tax rate is the Penobscot County tax. That is adopted actually each October and November and has its own public process. The county commissioners adopt the budget, and there's a mandatory assessment calculated by the value of each community. Our assessment for calendar year 24, calendar year 23 is up $23,000 or 2.7%, 79%. Next page. The RSU also has its own budget process. That their budget goes to referendum election tomorrow. And this is a mandatory assessment that the town pays and contributes to the tax. Their budget is up $442,162 or 6.1%. So if we looked at it in total, the net change to commitment is $3,601 or 0.03% increase. Next page. This lets you see the components. The dark, if I was going from 12 o'clock around the clock, the first dark blue is RSU 26, which represents 54.8% of the taxes collected. The town in light blue represents 39.1% of the taxes collected, and the county represents 6.1% of the taxes collected. Next page. Next slide. So this is my first stab at trying to do what Counselor Marks wanted. Well, and so this is looking historically, like, so this is, we're talking a lot about what the commitment is and the change in 1 year. We want to look longer. And I broke this purposefully into 2, but I'll tell you why in a minute. So for 5 years, FY17 to FY21, the municipal tax commitment increased approximately $228,000. Gonna get that wrong. If you look at the municipal tax rate, so this is the town component of the tax rate, you'll see that we moved in 2017 from $10.73 per $1,000 of taxable valuation up to $11.26. If you notice, there was kind of a bump in the middle at 2019 and we started to come back down. If you go to the next page, I broke it here because we had a reval and I didn't want to be comparing apples and oranges. So we had a reval which gave us considerably more value, which is why we went from $11.26 per 1,000 in 2021 to down to $10.51 per 1,000. Our tax rate bumped up to, we were looking for $6.1 million. And if you look in 23 and 24, we've come back down. And that mill rate has also decreased. Looking from 2017 to 2024, the real dollars difference that the municipality needed from taxpayers is $288,000 or 5.55% growth over 8 years. I think that's what you were looking for. Okay. Well, no, Belle can, oh, you can. All right. All right. Next one, Belle. And then for people who like charts and graphs and not numbers, same information, just charted as a portion of the commitment. If you look, blue represents the municipal tax commitment, which would be net. So our expenses minus our revenues. The county is that middle band in red, and the school is the marigold on the top. All of those are comparing the expenses minus the revenues. So these are all net comparisons. Next page. So I'm going to try to do some funky math and tell people what this means for a tax bill, but I always do it with the disclaimer that your tax rate is calculated in several areas, from several things. The amount of dollars that we need, but also the value of the community. So we are still working through the community valuation, and the numbers that you see may very well change a bit. One thing that we are doing is in all of my calculations for the budget this year, I used real growth. We are expecting an overall increase in the community value of 10% this year, but everybody will move at the same amount. So it won't be like the reval where some people, their tax bills went way up. This should give you a good approximation of increases in your actual tax bill. All right, next page. So if we look at the town, the RSU, the county, and the total, you'll see in for this your bill this year, you should see a decrease of $190 in your tax bill for the town, an increase of $167 for the county, for the school, an increase of $9 for the county, for a total decrease of $14. So this is a median home, which is valued at $260,000 or will be $260,000, that has a homestead exemption. So that is the reduction of the $25,000 of value. If you don't have a homestead, you're gonna see your overall bill is greater, but you'll see a decrease of $211 in the county, in the town. You'll see an increase of 185 in the RSU, $10 for the county, and overall a decrease of $16. And that is because the mill rate will go down. So that is what I have.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions or comments from council or public at this time?
So we still have WPCF.
Yes. Microphone.
Pardon me. Can you go back to the slides on the increase in mill rates, the ones that have the cutoff at FY21 to FY22?
Sure.
So if you go back one more. So I just want to be clear, what we're not seeing on either of these slides then is the increase in tax rate from 21 to 22. That isn't showing anywhere, correct?
So there's no increase. I'm not showing you increases here.
Well,
I'm
the
showing-
mill rate numbers, correct? which
Yeah,
show-
so you go to the next one.
Right.
You get the same information.
Yeah. My concern is just that the biggest increase in taxes actually happened from 21 into 22. And I don't think that's being captured anywhere. 21 into 22 was the $600,000 tax increase. Is that being captured anywhere on those slides?
I guess well, it's showing in the municipal commitment.
So if we go back, should it show then from 2021, 5,400 to?
I mean, the whole,
There,
the
okay,
whole,
right.
thing. I
So
mean,
it's
the
showing
whole,
from there to there on municipal
yeah,
commitment.
the whole thing
yeah.
is,
Yeah.
it's one, it's one spreadsheet
No, I
that keeps
understand.
going.
Yeah, I
said that-
understand. And I understand why you broke it there because it's really important what you did with the mill rate. It's super important because the mill rates make no sense otherwise.
Yeah.
But I just know for me, from having looked at these numbers a lot, that that's the year where we took a big jump in an increase on our municipal commitment, which for me has been driving some of my thoughts about the budget, that I'm concerned not just what might have grown from 23 to 24, but that there was a big increase from 21 into 22. And I wanted to be sure that that was visible. Thanks. I have a question about that later, but not now. Thanks.
Yeah, please come up, Doug.
Great presentation. Just curious if you add back in the two positions in Public Works and the equipment they need, will that affect these numbers?
It would increase approximately 60 cents on the mill rate. So the town would still be in a negative number, but it would be negative 12 cents on the mill rate as opposed to negative 72.
Thank you.
And I already have my numbers wrong because I've had them in my head too long, but yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
Do we now have a copy of this sent to us by any
Yeah,
chance?
it's in your FY24 budget information folder on the drive.
Okay, thanks.
Gonna go the other way, Belle.
WPCF.
The good news is WPCF, while super important, is also very quick. So as I said before, WPCF operates as its own enterprise fund, which means that it does not use tax dollars to operate. It operates completely through revenue derived from user fees, operations, and grants. So we are proposing a budget that maintains the current service level. It continues some capital expenditures and increases reserve appropriations. We are at a point where over the last decade, the 2 decades, 2 decades, the town has put a lot of money into addressing collection system issues in the issues that come from an aging collection system. And now our goal is to start rebuilding our reserves back up so that we can address the infrastructure when it fails again. This budget does require an increase in sewer user fees of 35 cents per 100 cubic feet of water consumption. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we get towards the end of the presentation. Next page. So that 35 cents is projected to increase our total revenues from user fees by about $133,000. And the other increase in this revenue budget has to do with our earnings on our investments and our just cash in the bank. We are also planning a pretty modest capital year this year. Going to, well, we'll talk about it in a little bit. Overall, a total increase of $379,400, mostly attributable, well, half attributable to capital increases and the rest for operations. I'm going to go to the next slide. So when we look at our expenses, personnel is up $41,000, and that has to do with the fact that we have an incredibly labor-intensive operation that requires fairly high licensure. We just got moved from a grade 4 plant to a grade 5 plant. And one of the things that we've learned is that we have very dedicated people who weren't going anywhere, but the region's labor market for wastewater operators has gotten very competitive, and we needed to bring salaries up to keep our very talented people. The other large increases have to do with utilities, primarily electricity, and professional services, which Chris, our superintendent, cut considerable amount out of the budget, which all got eaten back up with sludge disposal costs. They are going through the roof. This year, as you can see, our big goal was to increase that transfer to reserves. We're going to talk a little bit about capital in the next slide. So I would move. So our capital this year, we're looking at replacing or repairing some garage doors, about $11,000 for that. We also have Hillside and Pierce Street have some sewer main and structures that need to be repaired. That is currently in the budget, funded through infrastructure reserve, but has been floated to council to at least be partially funded through ARPA funds to allow us to refresh the reserve account. And then we put $20,000 a year into a miscellaneous infrastructure capital account that allows Chris and his team to replace and, to make repairs as they find them when they're doing their annual maintenance. So what you'll see in the next slides is that we are looking at a sewer fee increase. I think you got to go back one, Belle. So the increase is 35 cents per 100 cubic feet of use, which is how we bill. So it's going to go from $5.90 to $6.25 per 100 cubic feet. This would be effective July 1. It changes the minimum quarterly charge from to $75 per quarter, which is $4.20 per quarter or $16.80 per year for a change for minimum users. Next slide. So we talk about minimum users, but many families are use above the minimum. So we used 2,000 cubic feet for quarterly average for residential use. So that bill would be about $125 a quarter or $500 a year, an increase of $7 a quarter or $28 a year. To put this in perspective, our largest customer is the University of Maine. This increase will be about a $45,000 increase in their annual sewer bill. And I think you're going to see questions.
Thank you. Can I just ask a procedural question? Does this part of your presentation combine public hearing I as well?
So normally when we get to public hearing I say, does anybody have any questions about
Thank
what
you.
we already did?
All right, thanks.
I think from a procedural standpoint, it still has to be standalone. but-
Okay. So are there any public comments or questions regarding this section of the budget? Okay. Is there anyone online, Bill?
Nobody has their hand raised.
Thank you. Seeing none, I think we're ready to close this public hearing. We'll close public hearing H. We'll move into public hearing I. Consider a sewer user fee increase for fiscal year 2024.
That is also me, Belle.
The sewer user fee increase, do you want me to go back to that slide?
Yeah, there is the last slide in that presentation has the summary.
Got it.
Luckily, no big changes and there we go. So if we're going to, the fee schedule is a large document. It is available online. But I did want to just quickly go through what the changes are. So our summer camp in FY23, we charged $150 a week or $50 a day. This in FY24, we're going to $165 a week. Simply, that still puts us lower than many of the folks around us. Sewer fees, we just went through, so they all stem from that 35-cent increase. Return check fee, we currently are charging $15 a check. We're going to move that to $25 a check to account for not only the fee that we get, but the back office time to deal with it. And right now in FY23, if you want a copy of an ordinance, you need to pay 25 cents a page if we charge you. And it's on the fee schedule. However, it to me doesn't make sense to have it at 25 cents a page when the Freedom of Access Act request is capped at 10 cents a page. I would much rather have somebody come in and just ask me for this as opposed to put it through FOA, which is a whole bunch of other work. And that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a good rationale. Save everybody some aggravation. Is the summer camp no longer available by the day? You have to pay for the whole week at a time?
Yeah, and I think Mitch or Megan can speak to that, but my understanding is it has to do also with the numbers of people that we have and the
Hi there, Mitch Stone, Director of Community Development. Basically, what's happened with camp is that we are filling up at a rate in which we can't do the weekly rate, the daily rate, because people take a slot and we don't have any left. But we are literally seeing our weeks fill up to capacity already. So that's a good thing. But we just can't manage the daily rate because it takes a slot for the whole week and you can't manage it that way. So we moved that way. I think probably after looking at last year. So.
Thank you. I would joke that my son Greg is available to babysit for $45 a day, who's here in the audience, but I know we don't want to, he's not licensed, so I want to be careful.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions regarding fee structure? Okay, and just a note for clarification for Nancy that we combine budget hearings H and I. This is actually hearing J. So we'll close hearing J.
I do have a comment, I guess, or a question on the bounce check fee going from 15 to 25. It just a little concerning that it seems like that's going to hit probably the person that can afford it least. I understand trying to compensate on the back end and bounce checks are a pain, but they usually get dinged by your bank as well. At least that's what I've seen. And I just wonder if we might consider who that's going to most likely affect the most and rethink some of that possibly.
So the beautiful thing about the fee schedule is it ultimately is town councils, and you can talk about that on next Tuesday.
All right.
Great. Okay. We'll close public hearing J, move on to public hearing K to review the Orono Village Center District Development Program and the implementation of an assessment of $0 per $1,000 of taxable real and personal property for the Municipal Development District located in the downtown area known as the Village Center Tax District from July 1st, 2023 to June 30, 2024. I won't read the boundaries.
So one better, Jeff, I will show you the boundaries, and I'm hoping that Belle can expand that just a little bit. So when I came to Orono back in 2011, the town had a pretty active village district. It had its own additional tax of 50 cents per $1,000 of value. So if you were a residential or commercial property within this district, you paid more than everybody else. And you those monies were collected about between $7,500 and $8,000 a year. And the Orono Village Association would decide how they kind of wanted to utilize those funds. After the implementation of the village district, the town formed the tax increment financing district, the downtown and transit oriented TIF district, which gives the town money to do many of the very same things that a village district would allow. So when we changed from our old financial accounting software to our new software, our new old software, we looked at trying to implement the village tax in that software, and it would have required custom coding to be done. And they estimated it would be about $5,000. And so when we started to look at what the Orono Village Association was starting to kind of slow down and wasn't as active, and we were able to fund a lot of the development program with tax increment financing district dollars. So the council at that time said, well, do we need the village district? So they sent me on a mission to get some legal advice about the village district. Village districts are not easy to create. And the advice we got is, especially as our TIF begins to age, it's not a forever thing, that it makes sense for us to continue to renew the village district. In order for it to exist, council has to renew it each year. But that there was no requirement that you levy the additional tax. So each year we come to you and we say, this is what we're going to do. And it's very broad brush strokes. And then we tell you that we're going to fund it with tax increment financing district dollars and that you don't need to levy the assessment. So for the coming year, for the village district, we plan to continue doing all the things we're doing now. So we plan to continue to make an effort through Public Works and facilities to maintain the sidewalks in the downtown district. We will continue to do the augmented street sweeping in the district. We're also going to be working on developing or working through the planning partnership initiative project that is currently underway with DOT to look at the Route 2 corridor, of which the district is an integral part of that. We will continue to run the bus with a collaboration with the University of Maine, Orchard Trails, and the Avenue. We don't believe that we're going to do anything in the district that will require environmental controls. The Orono Village District was dissolved this past year. Mitch and his team will continue to work with downtown businesses to either figure out, is it gatherings every once in a while that works? Is it a separate entity that works to bring the businesses together so that they can have a voice in what is happening in the district? And residents, not just businesses. And we're going to continue to run those activities that we have been running. The village concerts on the green, the downtown trunk or treat, some pop-up events, those kinds of things we'll continue to do. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close public hearing K. That closes all public hearings. Moving on to agenda item 6, acknowledgements by counselors. I can't remember which end we started on last time. So start with Sarah, please.
Thanks. I guess what I really want to acknowledge is all the people who showed up today. This is really what I was personally hoping for, was that we would have a lot of people show up at the public hearing and give us their opinions about suggested budgets. So very, very much appreciate everyone who showed up. I hope that anyone who listens later can still fill out the budget survey link that's available online. For me, it was very helpful. My question the whole time has been, do people in the community want to keep our taxes close to the same level they're at now and keep our plowing the same, or would they prefer a tax cut and have slower plowing? I got a good bit of information tonight, and I imagine there's more online, and I thank everyone for participating.
So I agree with everything Sarah said, and I would also encourage people to check out the link on the Orono website to give us more feedback about this budget, because we've got a couple more weeks before we officially adopt it. I guess the main thing that comes to mind for me as an acknowledgement is just how wonderful all the flowers are around. I mean, it's a small, but I think a really important thing for the tone and atmosphere of town. And I've been really impressed actually with the thoughtfulness by which the flower displays all along this main street have been put together. And I love talking to the people who are putting those together as they're doing it. So appreciate that service.
I would like to thank all of the previous town councilors and public servants who were present tonight and have recently cycled off of council, and in particular, Cheryl Robertson. I want to give a shout out to all of her amazing work on the Environment Committee over the years. I deeply appreciate it.
I have two. The first one is to acknowledge the Orono boys and girls track team for their state championship win this past, maybe last weekend, 2 weekends ago now, but the athletes and coaching staff, really incredible experience. So I want to acknowledge them. And secondly, of course, I do want to acknowledge all of the staff for the work that's gone into this budget prior to when we saw it, and equally or perhaps as much since we've been working on it. So I do want to acknowledge all of their efforts from senior staff.
There's a lot to echo down at the end of the table. So I'd like to acknowledge all the great acknowledgements that came before me. I'd like to also acknowledge Ruth White, who is a young person, an Orono student who won the New England Track and Field Championship, 2 miles, 3,200 meters. Saw this young person running up and down Main Street several times in the past few weeks, wondering why she was running so fast wherever she was going. And now I know. But congratulations to her. It's a phenomenal accomplishment.
Yeah, it was wonderful to see the turnout tonight, and it's been wonderful to hear feedback throughout the budget process. I've learned a lot through that. Outside of that, there are two acknowledgements I want to make. One is Stillwater Community Arts is hosting Artsapalooza in person again, coming up this weekend. And it's always an awesome event. I'm really glad that it's happening again, live in lots of different venues around downtown. And those volunteers do a phenomenal job. My other acknowledgement is to our public safety staff who demonstrated today, as they've demonstrated many other times, their quick response and intense commitment to keeping our community safe in a whole variety of ways. So thank you. Yes, go ahead, sir. Okay,
Is somebody
moving on
speaking?
to, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Bill.
I was asking if somebody was speaking because there was a pause, but I heard nothing. So if somebody was speaking, the microphone needed to be turned on.
That was probably me. You want to try again?
Go
I
ahead.
just said also to acknowledge all the seniors who graduated this yesterday from the high school. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 8, consent agenda. I'd entertain a motion, the consent agenda.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
A second.
So moved.
All those in favor? Yes, thank you. Okay, new business, order 23-94, order accepting the resignation of Cheryl Robertson from town council. This is an item that came up in one of our workshops. We were informed several weeks ago. We acknowledged the receipt of her resignation at that time. We have to formally accept her resignation at this time. I'd like to read Cheryl's resignation letter into the record and then thank her for her service. Cheryl writes, I regret to inform you that I am resigning my seat on council effective immediately. I understand that all responsibility for this decision is mine. I truly appreciate my time on Orono Town Council as a valuable learning experience and have had the opportunity to serve my community as an Orono Town Councilor for over 5 years. This position is no longer aligned with my value system and my understanding of council's role in town government. Thank you, Cheryl. And we recently heard a really nice acknowledgement of Cheryl's time and work on council, and I'd like to echo that. So we do need a motion to accept the resignation. Thank you.
And
After we have a motion in a second, we can have public comment.
I move that we accept with regrets.
Thank you.
I would second that.
Any discussion or comment?
Megan Gardner, Bennick Road. I just want to thank Cheryl for her service. She and I served together on council for many years. And I think that Cheryl is a great example of how the council staff relationship can work really, really well. The town is run day to day by people who are experts through their educational background and their experiential background in things that you, me, no one who sits at that dais is an expert in and never will be. And so it's really important for council to know what they don't know and listen to staff, right? But then the reverse is also true. So counselors can very frequently bring this rich wealth of experience that staff do not have. And it can really positively impact the way that the town functions when that relationship between staff and council is working really well. And I think Cheryl's an excellent example of this because her commitment to environmental causes changed the way that staff looked at their role. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. She brought that passion and that interest and that knowledge and that expertise to council. And it shifted the way that the town operations looked at environmental issues. And we owe a debt of gratitude to Cheryl for that. And so I think that one of the things that I hope is a good takeaway, and it's very sad that she no longer feels like she can participate with council, but I hope that a takeaway from that is that you all have a diverse background of expertise and interests, and you could share that with staff. And they can be their experts in their areas and you can be your experts in your areas. And when that relationship is working harmoniously, it benefits everybody in the town. Thanks. And thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion on this item? Okay. We need to vote. All those in favor of accepting the resignation of Counselor Robertson? Thank you. Okay, moving on. Order 23-95, order calling a special election on Tuesday, August 8th, 2023 to fill the vacant town council term expiring March 2024 to be held in the Orono Town Council Chambers located at 59 Main Street, Orono, Maine, with polls open on election day from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Sophie?
So we've discussed this at some length last week, but with Cheryl's resignation, we would immediately turn to the town charter to give us guidance as to what council's next steps should be. Because this resignation comes in more than 6 months before the next annual municipal election, which would be March of 24. The charter requires that council hold a special election. As I talked with council before, when I initially reached out to Maine Municipal Association, the first thought was that calling an election just meant we had to call it within 60 days. That thought, as many things at MMA, they dig in more, which is always good. And they amended their guidance to tell us that really needed to hold the election within 60 days, but that we should call the town attorney. So I did reach out to Roger Huber to get his opinion based on our charter, and he agrees that it needs to be the election needs to be held within 60 days. So when we count forward from today, which is your formal acceptance of the resignation, which creates the vacancy on council, the 60th day would be August 11th. So on June 5th, we all sat back with a very complicated timeline to kind of work backwards from how we could work this. Normally, with a regular election, the timeline is significantly longer than 60 days. Normally, there is a requirement for a 40-day nomination period. Statute does allow for an abbreviated nomination period in situations like this. That similar provision in Title 21, in Title 30A would say that we could also hold an election as little as 14 days after the end of the nomination period. However, there's a conflict in state statute. Imagine that. And so we then have to look at Title 21A that mandates that all elections have a minimum of a 30-day absentee ballot period. So that means that the minimum time frame for holding an election is 40 days. If the town were to use coded ballots, we would have to add 10 days to that. Based on our conversation, council indicated that they would much prefer having a longer nomination period and using a hand-printed, well, not hand-printed, a photocopied ballot that couldn't be read by the machine. So with that timeline, staff worked backwards and keeping in mind the priorities that council had. It looks like we could hold the election on August 8th, which was important to council to try to keep it on a Tuesday to be consistent. We would open the nomination period tomorrow and it would close July 5th at noon. So noon is the important factor there. We would then open absentee balloting from July 6th through August 8th, which is the polls are open on the 8th, and that election would happen here. So that's what, based on conversation with staff, with council, that's the timeline that staff would propose.
Thank you. Any discussion on this item?
I just wanted to thank the town staff and legal staff for the really good work. I mean, it was complicated, but it was clear once you dug into it. So I thought it was really well presented. And this is one of the most important, obligations we have. And I feel really comfortable with what was presented to us. So thank you.
Thank you. Great. Seeing no further comments, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of accepting this order? Passes. Thank you. Moving on to order 23-96, order approving the repeal and replacement of Chapter 18, Article 8 floodplain management of the Town of Orono ordinances to conform to the state of Maine model floodplain ordinance. This is Kyle. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second.
Second.
Thanks. No, go ahead. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Kyle Drexler, Town Planner. So yeah, we're here for the final step in this process for the ordinance amendment to repeal and replace our floodplain management article in the land use ordinance. As you might know, or for anyone who hasn't tuned in until now, FEMA is updating the flood insurance rate maps for the region. The previous maps were from 1978. These new maps will go into effect July 19th, 2023. So to maintain compliance with the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, the town is required to update the ordinance to meet the state model ordinance that was supplied to us several months ago by that effective date for the maps. So this ordinance amendment meets those requirements to maintain compliance with the NFIP. In addition to referencing the new adopted maps, it also updates performance and development standards for any development projects happening in the floodplain areas. So we would use those to review projects going forward. This has gone through planning board public hearing, council public hearing. So with adoption today, we would be able to meet that compliance deadline. And the only sort of additional step we would have here that we normally wouldn't with an ordinance amendment is that we just have to send a copy to the state floodplain management office after it's adopted.
Thank you. Any questions for Kyle? Sophie, any other details of clarification?
Not for me.
All right. Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of order 2396? It passes. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Thanks.
All right, we have tabled order 2397. So moving to 2398, order authorizing the town manager to submit an application. Yes. Oh, we do have to take a motion. Okay, the answer why we have to have a motion to table that item. It was an agenda adjustment, but we have to move to table it. So I would
move we table 2397.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, on to 2398. Order authorizing the town manager to submit an application to the Secretary of State for the relocation of the November election polling place used for any federal state elections held during 2023 to 2025 to the Collins Center for the Arts, University of Maine, due to an infrastructure project taking place at the previous location, the New Balance Fieldhouse. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, we'll move in a second. Discussion. Yes.
So what is it? I'm sure you've looked at it, but can you just talk to us about what parking will be like over there? Because that Collins Center lot can be, you can be parking in the old town if you're not careful.
So Belle,
Yes. Parking at the Collins Center.
yeah,
So typically what the university does is they block off a section of parking specifically for the election. And that's why we are requesting to move it, because the parking area by the field house will be under construction and there will not be available parking for an election. So that would really limit access for the community.
I just, and there was a $1,500 fee. Is that, do we pay to rent it or is that for staffing at the event? Or
it's
So that
no
that-
more.
Sorry, Sophie.
No, you go.
So that covers the facility rental as well as any of the people who would need to be there while we are there. It also allows us to get in the day before and set up the election, as opposed to at the field house where we're allowed to bring the equipment in, but it sets alongside the field house wall until 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And then we have to hope we have volunteers and pay some overtime in order to set it up when we're at the field house. But this way we'll be able to set it up all during the day and make sure we've got everything in place long before the close of business on a Monday.
And that fee, the rental fee is traditional. We've traditionally paid the university for the cost of.
So we normally will pay for their costs. This, we were expecting a little bit, we were expecting a lot more than this, because the Collins Center is its own cost center at the university. But the director, I think Danny Williams, just really worked with us and cut their fees, their normal fees significantly to get us in.
Yeah, thank you.
So yes, we got special
us
treatment.
Access to the full building if we need it in order to accommodate all the different registration and voting, and what we are expecting will be long lines in 2024.
Yeah, can you, I was curious about that, Belle. Just thinking about going into the, are we anticipating like having to go down on the stage, or will that be in the lobby? That, to me, that doesn't seem like that's a great setup. Voting, just thinking about like compared to the field house, obviously, but do you already sort of have a plan in mind as far as how we would utilize that facility?
Yep, so we've walked through it. We have the CAD drawing for the facility so that we can make sure that we can lay everything out. We'll have a kind of a trial run this fall, because this is kind of a mid-year election. We're not expecting a huge turnout. And we have access to the second floor. We're thinking that perhaps during the presidential election, that the second floor will be where the bulk of voter registration will be. Well, but we'll also have a voter registration table for ADA accommodation as well. But when there's not people in there, the space is significantly larger than you might recall. And then there's also furniture in there that will all be kind of moved out of the way in order to put in voting booths and registration tables.
Did we consider, I mean, how long have we been having it at the university in the field house? Has it been 5 years, 10 years now, or? Did we consider using these facilities? I remember at some point being in the Orono Middle School as well, and I think we used maybe Keith Anderson at
So
some point.
there is an issue. We ran into issues at the Orono Middle School. I think the school really tried to accommodate us, but there were issues for them with having us take over their whole gym. Also with having people who maybe aren't allowed at the school to be able to vote. A lot of schools will use in-service days or things like that, but we couldn't get it to line up on our calendar for that. So we tried. So when I first arrived in Orono, we had voting here on campus at the Memorial Union and at the Birch Street School and or the senior center. And we ended up with lines wrapped here and at the Birch Street at the senior center because we added a ton of people to our voter rolls when we brought the large housing complexes on. The other thing that happens is when you're voting in 3 different locations, if you're, for example, a university student, we are now, we would have precincts that we would actually use. We use wards and precincts back then. And if you were living in one apartment in one area and you registered to vote, maybe you were supposed to be at the senior center, and then you move the next year and you go to the senior center because that's the place you know you want to vote. And suddenly you not only have to re-register, you have to go someplace else. And it was incredibly frustrating to a fairly significant number of people trying to vote. So that is when we tried to use the school and campus. And ultimately, we were having issues with the school, not with the school people, but using the school. And decided that the best course of action was to go to the field house that could support the number of people there. We have also, because we have folks in the community that are not interested in going to the campus and navigating campus to be able to vote, which is why we have an incredibly robust absentee offering here, far beyond what most communities would do, so that people who don't want to go navigate that can come vote here in person or get a ballot. And for big elections, we also have those absentee balloting days where you come here as if it were a regular election day, usually the 2 weeks before the election, and you just absentee vote.
Will we plan to do that in the presidential one? Is that what
Oh,
you just?
I would guess
Yeah.
that we would do that.
I
I mean, that
I
just makes it easier all around.
Yeah, yeah.
If people know who they want to vote for, we'd like them to get a ballot in.
Get in, get out. I guess I am a little, I think it's probably, it felt like a big deal back when it got moved to the university, and it feels a little bit like it could be a big deal for some people moving it somewhere else in the university. I realize we have to for a couple of years, but it would seem to me that it would be much more natural if we did it in town for those people that are off years are voting in town anyway. I get that it's probably capacity wise, we're just out of luck, but it's a little unfortunate, I guess. So.
Yeah, I understand, Leo, what you're saying, and I agree with you, but the size of the operation that we run in terms of voter registration and having one central place to do all that is, I volunteered this past, or participated as a ballot helper, and it was phenomenal how we were able to serve so many people that are brand new to it, to voting with us. And it was, it's really impressive. And I think the new field house is nice, big open space, and it'll be work to get that same, particularly in a presidential election year where there'll be a great deal of interest. But I do think having it in one place and having everybody, all the expertise that we have in one place makes a lot of sense too. So
I would say I think this makes a lot of sense too. And I also appreciate Danny being willing to work with us. And I also think it's great that we keep it at the university for accessibility to students as well, who might have a harder time getting to this side of town. The people in town have to get to the university. So I think it's an equitable arrangement.
And just as a reminder, Community Connector does free fares on election day, and they drop off right at the polling place. So we'll move that from the field house, of course, to the Collins Center if it's approved.
Great. Thank you. Any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote on order 2398. All those in favor? Yes, unanimous. Moving on to order 2399, order authorizing the town manager to execute a municipal quitclaim deed, transfer the town's ownership interest in tax acquired property currently described as map 031-002 lot 028, 69 Margin Street to Richard Kunkel of Jewett City, Connecticut, on behalf of the prior owner of record upon receipt of funds. This is take a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Sophie.
So this is worded a little bit differently than council's used to, but let me walk through the process. Last December, the town foreclosed on 69 Margin Street for failure to pay 2021 taxes. So the taxes were about 18, well, more than that now, almost 2 years overdue. In accordance with town policy or the redemption policy, the town staff first offered the assessed owner of record to the opportunity to buy it back. They buy it back by paying all of the taxes and sewer fees owed, as well as a redemption fee. The assessed owner of record paid that. I'm not exactly sure how he paid it, but it got paid. And as we were starting the process of getting it deeded back to him, we discovered that he had actually deeded his interest in the property to his brother, Richard. So when we look, the town has been made whole in accordance with its policy. Deeding it back to Donald would just create a problem with the title process. So we're gonna deed it back to the person that he deeded his interest to. This is not a situation where somebody came to us and said, if I pay it, will you deed it to me? That is not within our policy. This is following the chain that had they gone through a different kind of process, they probably wouldn't have been able to transfer ownership, but a family process without title search created kind of a little kerfluffle.
Move approval.
One moment.
So moved or?
We're waiting to vote. There's no further discussion. We'll vote on order 23-99. All those in favor of accepting the order? Thank you. It's unanimous. Moving on to order 23-100, order approving the purchase of 5 45-minute self-contained breathing apparatus bottles for general. Okay.
This was the revised post division.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Yes. From the beginning. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, order approving the purchase of up. That is also not quite correct. Yeah. Okay. Up to 5. Thank you. Yeah, that's fine. I've got it. Order approving the purchase of up to 5 self-contained breathing apparatus bottles from Fire Tech and Safety of Winthrop, Maine, at a total cost of up to $8,475 to be paid from approved fiscal year 23 capital equipment budget hazmat reserve. And we need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Yes.
So this is what happens when they're, again, too many.
I need a microphone.
Nope, you didn't need a microphone for that.
Okay,
Give me just a second.
okay. It's difficult when there's side conversation and I can just hear words, but not, or I can just hear sound, but not words.
So, So we just want to say approving the purchase of self-contained breathing apparatus, no up tos, no 5s, no up tos, just self-contained breathing apparatus.
Okay,
Bottles.
so let's amend this. In order approving the purchase of self-contained breathing apparatus bottles. Shall we go on?
Yep, from Fire Tech and Safety of
Yes.
Winthrop.
From, as you said, I don't have that revised. Yeah, from Fire Tech and Safety Winthrop, Maine. To be paid from approved fiscal year 23 capital equipment budget hazmat reserves. Thank you. No, we're not. We are including that, 8475.
The cost is fine, but the number, I know it will be at least 5, but we're hoping to get 6 for the price of 5.
It'd be even better to cost not to exceed $8,475. Move approval, please.
I would move approval of an undetermined, hopefully high number of bottles for a maximum price of $8,475.
Second.
Thank you. Deputy Chief.
Yes, Kevin Sarwa, Deputy Chief, Fire Chief. So this would be a planned staggered replacement of our self-contained breathing apparatus air bottles. It's not the whole pack, just the bottle. They have a 15-year lifespan. So what we're trying to do is, instead of having all the bottles have to go out and be replaced all at once, that we would do it as a staggered approach. So that's what we're looking for. Like I said, hopefully not to exceed the $8,475.
Thank you. Any discussion? No. All those in favor of approving order 23-100? Thank you. Unanimous. Moving on to order 23-101, order authorizing the town manager to enter into an agreement with Thibodeau Technics of South Portland, Maine for public safety building facility assessment at a cost not to exceed $58,300. Funds drawn from the remaining approved fiscal year 23 capital budget for this project and remainder from the American Rescue Plan Act grant funds. Need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Bobby Erickson.
Yeah, so staff is recommending that we accept a proposal from Sebago Technics for the facility assessment study. The project will include a programming exercise for both agencies, both police and fire, to address the needs of those departments, both operationally and spatially for the building. Then we'll also include a full assessment of the building for code compliance, as well as an overall assessment of all the major systems in the facility to help us begin to start planning moving forward on how to address what we've identified as some pretty significant spatial needs and some issues with the condition of the facility. The cost for the project is $58,300 to be paid with ARPA funds. And like I said, this is an initial phase that will come with recommendations for some low-hanging fruit, some important things that need to be done right away, as well as become a planning tool for us as we decide how we want to move forward.
Thank you. We've discussed this extensively in workshop, but if there's questions or concerns.
I appreciated the, I appreciated the discussion and patience we had, particularly for those of us brand new to the council when this first came forward. I think we've got, hearing about service levels and the needs of the community. And I appreciate this is going forward as part of the budget, and it gives us a chance to look at this kind of comprehensively about what our needs for the public safety are. And, maybe we're going to have some decisions to make directionally in terms of articulating a vision. And I think this will be an important part of it. So I thank you for bringing it forward and being patient with us as we ask some questions.
I really just wanted to say the same to what Dan said. Thank you very much. You guys were very patient as we came up to speed on that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, call for a vote on order 23-101. Those in favor? Opposed? When opposed? Order passes. All right, that closes that section of the agenda. Next item is future agenda items of concern. Okay, seeing none, public petitions. Don't believe we have any this time. One more chance for public comment. For anybody who'd like to comment publicly? Yes, go ahead, Chief Lowe.
Jeff Lowe, Director of Public Safety. I'm going to share a story with you from earlier today that Council Wingard actually kind of referenced. And I had an opportunity to meet a gentleman as I was literally looking down his windpipe, placing a plastic tube in to breathe for him while his heart had stopped. And we were able to resuscitate that man while at the incident scene. And we were able to get him to the hospital, where I believe right now he is resting in the ICU, and hopefully we'll have an outcome that leads to a positive discharge without anything ultimately bad happening to him. It took 8 of us to get that outcome at the incident scene today. It wouldn't have mattered if he was 80 years old or 8 years old. It still would have been 8 people that required that. And it just so happened that we had some people in-house and we had the police department there supporting us as well. That's why we were successful with that gentleman. We were able to get there quickly and we were able to deliver that level of care. We're entering a new phase of the budgeting process once the books close on 2024, FY24. Where you will take a deep, intensive look into how we're spending money, what we're spending money, who we're spending money on, and those types of things. This council, in my opinion, in the 5 years that I've been here, clearly has a distaste for the budget and at times expresses antipathy for some of the members of staff, or at least it feels that way. That's the perception. I might be wrong, but that's the feeling that some of us get. And it's bothersome and it's demoralizing because our goal is to provide you with information that you need to make those good decisions. And it's hard to do that when going out the gate, it feels like that there is a desire to slash without truly understanding what slashing or cutting means. I don't envy your position. You have to balance critical infrastructure. And I will put forward that police, fire, public works are all critical infrastructure in your community. You have to balance that against the social wants and desires. You have to balance it against the educational wants and desires and what the beliefs are of your constituents. I guess what I would ask for going forward for both me and frankly, all the department directors is that you take some time and just listen to what we're telling you. We've been doing this a long time. I've been a firefighter for 37 years. I've been a paramedic for 26. I've been a chief officer for 12. I have a master's in business with a focus in public administration and a whole host of other things that help me through this job and can help you get to where you need to be. If you got to cut, you got to cut. That's great. But at least take the time to really explore and balance what your constituents want against what we're telling you, because we're not just people out here doing this who have no background or experience. All we want to do is be heard and to be able to support you through the processes you have to make. And I appreciate the time to be able to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. There are other public comment before we close tonight. Is there anybody online, Bill? Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Nobody
Yep.
has their hand raised.
Chief Lowe, there's been a lot of inquiry and a lot of back and forth and it's not my intent as counselor and I hope it's not, I don't think it's the intent of anyone else's to ask questions and to judge, to question people's professionalism or their criteria or their credentials or their intent. And, talk about having to have a conversation. That's what we want. I want the conversation. I want to ask questions and what we end up voting on, passing at the end of the day, we may need to spend more, I think the community has to be engaged in terms of understanding what's going on and, what they value and they'll tell us. And I've said it before, I don't really care what our tax rate is. I want people to believe that they value what they're getting for what they pay. And I do, to the extent that anyone in anyone in the municipality, anyone watching at home online, anyone attending a meeting feels like this, questions are in some way a challenge. I don't think that's what the process, I know that's not what I'm trying to do. And I do, if it comes across that way, I apologize. It's not my intent. And so I wanted to say that. And I don't think others are trying to, inquiry is not an inquisition. And as far as I'm concerned, and I'm looking forward to working together. So thank you.
Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, I wanted to say the same. I really appreciate your speaking, and I feel exactly the same way that I have been really appreciative of information that's been shared. And I can speak for myself, but I think for other counselors also in saying that inquiries for me are always about understanding what we're doing so that I understand and can explain and, advocate with the public about what it is we're doing, or at least give them clear information so they can, as Dan said, participate in a decision, sometimes a hard decision, but hopefully not. Maybe there's a way that we can not have to make those hard choices. I don't know, but I'm so grateful for the information. And I also have no agenda coming in about what happens with that budget. I don't know if it needs to grow or if it needs to shrink, or if it needs to stay the same. I just want clear information for me and for the public so we can together with you all make that decision. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no other comment at this time, we've removed the executive session from our agenda tonight. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded. Okay. All those in favor? Thank you very much.